Hi, my name's Seren, and I spent Christmas watching my sister blow up my life, using numbers she had no right to touch. The room smelled like pine and cinnamon, the artificial kind that comes from store-bought candles no one remembers lighting. Fake snow clung to the windowsills, and somewhere in the kitchen, I could hear my mother humming off-key to a holiday playlist she never updated. It was Christmas Day, my first time home in 2 years. I hadn't wanted to come back. But I said yes because I thought maybe time changes people, or softens them, or at least teaches them not to repeat history. I was wrong. Guess what I brought, everyone? Camille's voice rang from the hallway, louder than the chime of the doorbell that had gone ignored for 5 full seconds. She strutted into the living room in a velvet red dress 2 sizes too tight and confidence 10 sizes too big. In her hand, a gold box, sparkly ribbon, smug grin. Something about that look made my stomach shift. I thought we agreed. No surprise gifts this year, my mom said playfully, wiping her hands on a Christmas apron that read, "Bless this mess." Oh, this isn't a gift. Camille winked, placing the box dead center on the coffee table. It's a reveal. She looked straight at me when she said that. I froze. She motioned to the box like a magician about to pull a dove from a hat. This year, I thought we'd do something special, something honest. Then she opened it. Inside was a neat stack of printed papers, stapled, highlighted, and tabbed with little stickers. My full name was at the top of the first page, and the second, and the third. I recognized the font before I registered the content. It was a financial statement. My financial statement. Camille turned to our parents. Surprise! Seren's been holding out on us. What is this? My father asked, leaning over with a frown already forming. Her bank balances, Camille answered brightly. Investment accounts, business holdings, real estate portfolios, all under Seren's name, all active, as of last month. Mom gasped. Wait, this can't be real. It's real. Camille's grin didn't waver. I double-checked. Triple, actually. I stood up slowly. My hands were cold, but I kept them steady. Where did you get that? Camille blinked. It wasn't password protected. You really should be more careful where you leave your login files. I hadn't even sat down yet, and she was already peeling me open like a gift she wanted to return. My father looked over the pages, jaw tightening. 27.9 million? Camille fake whistled. Talk about a Christmas miracle. No one said anything for a beat too long. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. Silence. Then Mom turned toward me, eyes wide. Not with concern, with expectation. Honey, is this true? It was never meant to be a conversation, I said quietly. Not here. Not like this. You've been hiding this from us? Dad's voice sharpened, the way it used to when I forgot to clean the dishes growing up. All this time? I haven't been hiding anything. I've just been living. Camille leaned back against the couch, one arm sprawled like she owned the room. Living quietly, huh? We didn't even know you had a company, let alone 5. And properties in Austin, Seattle, and Lake Tahoe? Babe, you're a ghost with a mortgage in every time zone. I wanted to leave, right then, but something in me stayed rooted to the floor. Maybe it was the absurdity of it all, or maybe the look in my mother's eyes. Not pride, not confusion, but calculation. We could use your help, she said after a moment, smoothing her sweater like she was trying to press out wrinkles in the air. There it was. Not, are you okay? Not, why would Camille do this? Not, how did this happen? Just we could use your help. What kind of help? I asked, even though I already knew. Camille answered for them. Jake, my husband, is looking to start his own company. Something sustainable. Eco-forward. You'd love it. It's kind of your vibe. She waved toward the documents. Even just a fraction of this would go a long way. You stole from me. Accessed, she corrected, lips pursed. Family shouldn't have secrets. I never asked you for anything. I said, voice quiet but sharp. Camille smiled. Exactly. And now you can give without guilt. Here's what you need to know about Camille. She's the type who trips you down the stairs and then says you fell because you weren't watching your step. She's done it our entire lives. Only back then, it was easier to hide the bruises. Now she was doing it in front of everyone. And smiling. I think it's fair, Dad added. You've had a lot of success. And Camille and Jake, well, they've been struggling. I looked around the room, the Christmas lights blinking like lies on a loop. I gave you space, I said. I stayed quiet. I never asked to be part of this family's chaos again. Then why come back at all? Camille asked sweetly. And I didn't have an answer, because I'd asked myself the same thing since the moment I saw that gold box. That night, I packed my bag. Not in anger, not even in sadness. Just clarity. I left the gold box sitting on the coffee table. I didn't take the papers. I didn't rip them up. I didn't scream. But I did leave a note. Just 2 lines. Camille, you never asked how I earned it, but you just proved you never deserved any of it. I walked out at 11:42 p.m. I haven't been back since. The truth is, that Christmas ambush didn't surprise me. Not really. Not because I expected Camille to print my net worth and parade it around like a holiday centerpiece, but because I've always known she was waiting for a moment to take back the spotlight. She just finally realized I'd outgrown the stage. Growing up with Camille was like sharing a room with a wildfire. Uncontained, dramatic, beautiful from a distance, and dangerous up close. When I was 7, I learned to wait. Wait until she was done crying. Wait until she'd left the house. Wait until her mood changed. That was the only time things settled enough for me to exist. My mother used to say, Camille's just sensitive. You need to be the steady one. I didn't know it at the time, but steady was code for invisible. We were raised in a 2-story colonial in upstate New York. White fence, brick chimney, hydrangeas in the spring. It looked perfect from the outside, and maybe that was the point. Inside, everything orbited around Camille. She was the beautiful one, the emotional one, the almost gifted child who was just too spirited for school structure. She quit piano lessons, abandoned dance class, flunked 2 semesters of community college. Still, she was treated like royalty every Thanksgiving, every birthday, every minor achievement inflated with applause. I got a certificate once in middle school, perfect attendance. My dad looked at it, nodded, and said, You never caused trouble. That's good. Camille brought home a participation ribbon from a youth art fair for a painting she didn't even finish. Mom framed it and hung it in the hallway. That hallway. God, I remember that wall so well. It was the wall of curated memories. Camille's half was full. Ballet photos, her high school senior portrait with the gold trim, a picture of her and Dad in front of a lake when she got into SUNY for a semester she never finished. My side? 2 photos, one from 3rd grade. The other, my college ID. That wall said everything no one dared to speak out loud. The first time Camille wrecked her credit was at 23. She'd started a business selling hand-poured soy candles with names like Zen Forest and Morning Fog. She borrowed $6,000 from Dad, another $2,000 from our aunt. When that wasn't enough, she opened 2 credit cards under her name and maxed them out buying inventory and packaging. When I asked if she had a marketing plan, she rolled her eyes and said, Not everyone's obsessed with spreadsheets, Sarin. A year later, the business collapsed. She called me crying from her apartment, saying she couldn't afford rent and might have to sell her laptop to pay utilities. I wired her $500. Not because I wanted to, but because my mother called that same day and said, Please, just help her this once. She's already feeling like a failure. Camille never paid me back. She never said thank you either. There was a moment, just one, where I thought maybe she could change. It was 4 years ago. I just launched my 3rd consulting firm, and it was growing faster than projected. Camille asked to meet me for lunch. Not a family thing, just us. She wore minimal makeup that day. Her hair pulled back. Her eyes looked tired, but grounded. She ordered tea instead of a cocktail. And then she said, I envy you. You've done something real. I want to build something too. It was the closest thing to vulnerability she'd shown me in a decade. So I listened. I helped her sketch out ideas. I connected her with a contact from my old PR circle. I even put together a brand package for her, for free. We worked together on and off for 3 months. Then she ghosted me. 3 weeks later, I saw on Instagram that she'd launched a different version of the brand, with new partners, none of whom had any experience. The brand folded 6 months later. She never mentioned our meetings again. I should have known then that she didn't want a sister. She wanted a ladder. A few nights after Christmas, back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing the way Camille smiled when she passed the box to Dad. It wasn't just confidence, it was a dare. She knew what she'd done was wrong, but she didn't care. She assumed the fallout would fall on me. And why wouldn't she? It always had. I lay in bed thinking about a time when we were little. Camille had broken Mom's antique vase, the one from my grandmother's wedding. I was in the same room. She pointed at me without hesitation, said I'd knocked it over while chasing her. I remember the sting of the slap on my wrist. I remember the way Camille stood in the hallway, watching, smirking. Back then, I thought she was just scared. Now, I know it was strategy. The last conversation we had before Christmas was via text. She messaged out of the blue, "Hey, do you still use that old Dropbox for work stuff?" I replied, "No. I use a private vault." What I didn't realize until later was that she had guessed my password. Not because she hacked me, but because I had once, used a variant of our childhood dog's name. She knew that. She knew the way I thought, and she exploited it. That wasn't thoughtlessness, that was intent. She's just struggling right now. That's what Mom always said. And it's what she said again. On the phone, 2 days after the Christmas fallout. I didn't answer at first. She left a voicemail. "Serene, your sister made a mistake, but you're stronger. You've always been more rational. Please don't let this destroy the family. We're asking for understanding, not punishment." That was the moment something clicked inside me. Not rage, not grief. Clarity. They would never change. They would always expect me to carry the consequences of Camille's choices because I was stronger. But I wasn't stronger. I was just done. Some people don't just cross the line. They draw it, just to watch you step over, so they can call you the villain. There's a point in betrayal where sadness stops showing up first. What comes instead is calculation. After Christmas, after Camille's performance in front of our parents, I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast, just the low hum of the heater and the weight of decisions forming in my chest. I didn't cry. That scared me more than anything. My apartment sits on the 28th floor of a high-rise overlooking the Hudson. You can see the skyline from my kitchen sink if you lean a little. Most days I don't. I'm not one for metaphors. But that night, I stood there, wine glass untouched on the counter, watching Manhattan blink like the world wasn't built on power games and betrayal. I kept thinking, Camille didn't just cross a boundary. She memorized my steps, walked ahead, and drew a line herself, one I wasn't supposed to notice until it was too late. Except I did notice, and I wasn't planning to step over it. 3 days later, I went to work. Not my job. The office had been on autopilot since I'd appointed my managing partner in Austin, but the work, the kind that happens in quiet, with gloves on and ego off. I started digging. First, I checked access logs across all my platforms. I'd expected to find a few login attempts. What I found instead? Camille had accessed 3 separate cloud drives, including an archive from an old startup that held prototype valuations and investor pitch decks. She used a VPN, but it was amateur work. The IP trail was muddy, not invisible, and the last access was 2 days before Christmas. Her final download? A PDF of the financial summary I'd prepared for a Series B pitch, including confidential growth forecasts and projected equity positions. She hadn't just shared my balance sheet. She'd broadcasted a roadmap to my future earnings, which meant someone else had seen it. I forwarded the logs to Zach, my cybersecurity consultant. A quiet guy, used to hedge fund breach cases and executive level sabotage. He didn't flinch. I've seen this pattern before, he said. Siblings are rare. Usually it's ex-business partners or spouses. But this looks deliberate. He paused, scrolling. She accessed a secondary folder. Password manager backup. Do you know what's in that? I swallowed. Yes. Inside that folder was a recovery keychain, a dead man vault containing backdoors to key business accounts, crypto wallet info, even my living trust. I felt my chest tighten. Not panic, not fear. Just this cold, still realization. She could have dismantled me. Later that evening, I called an old contact. Elna, a corporate litigator with a specialty in internal fraud and privacy violations. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She didn't ask about my family or the holidays. She picked up and simply said, "What do you need?" I told her everything. Not all at once, not in a flood, but in the exact way you present a case. Clear, focused, irrefutable. She listened. At the end, there was silence on the line. Then, she accessed your private financial data, used it to publicly disclose your wealth, and potentially used it to inform a competing party? Yes. Do you want to sue her? I hesitated. Elena continued, her voice lower now. Not everything goes to court, but sometimes, filing is the first way to make people understand they don't own you. That hit me harder than expected, because that's exactly what it was. Camille didn't just break trust. She believed she had ownership over me, over my choices, my work, my success. Like my stability existed solely to patch the holes in her sinking ship. I wasn't going to let her do that again. I didn't text Camille. I didn't threaten her. I knew that silence unnerves people like her more than rage ever could. Instead, I spent the next week building a quiet firewall around everything I owned. My real estate holdings were shifted under a new corporate umbrella. My banking accounts were split between jurisdictions. I hired a digital forensics firm to mirror Camille's online activity during the breach window. And then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I visited my parents. It was a cold Sunday. I didn't bring a suitcase. Didn't bring gifts. I rang the doorbell, waited. My mother opened the door in a cardigan and surprise. "Seren?" "Hi." She stepped aside. "Are you here to talk?" I nodded. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Camille once spilled grape juice on my 6th grade math trophy and called it an accident. Mom poured coffee, stirred it too long. The clink of metal on porcelain grated. "She's sorry, you know." I didn't respond. She got carried away. She just wanted to feel important. She wanted to humiliate me. She didn't mean for it to go that far. I looked up. "Mom, she accessed my private financial data. That's not going too far. That's a felony." She blinked, but said nothing. "I need you to understand something," I continued. "I'm not here to fix this. I'm not here to comfort Camille. I came here to tell you that I know exactly what she did, and I'm taking action." Mom looked shaken for the first time. "She's your sister." "No, she's your daughter. Mine. She's a liability." That moment changed something between us. Not loud, not final, just a quiet breaking, like a string snapping inside a grand piano. Inaudible from the audience, but fatal to the music. On the way out, I passed Camille's old bedroom. The door was cracked open. Inside, her old ballet trophies lined the shelf. Next to them, taped to the mirror, a yellowed post-it note, my handwriting. "You're gonna do great. I believe in you." I remember writing that the night before her first business pitch. She never told me she kept it. Back in the city, I received a call from Zach. "I traced one of the emails she used to forward your documents. You're not going to like it." I braced myself. "Who?" He exhaled. "Chase Ellison." My stomach flipped. Chase wasn't just anyone. He was a VC fund manager with ties to one of my competitors, someone Camille dated casually 3 years ago and had supposedly cut ties with. He had just pitched a company with an eerily similar model to my upcoming launch. And now, I knew why. Some betrayals don't scream, they whisper, and still leave everything broken. By the time my mother invited me for the family conversation, I already knew what it would be. They weren't ready to apologize. They were ready to negotiate. The message came through a voicemail. Again. Come for dinner. Let's talk like a family. No lawyers, no drama. That last part was ironic, considering drama was our family's native tongue. Their house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the gray weather. Or maybe I'd just outgrown the idea that they were my home. Dinner was already served when I walked in. Lasagna, garlic bread, oversauced green beans. The kind of meal Mom made when she wanted to keep things simple. Camille was already at the table, sipping wine, dressed like someone trying to seem casual, but perfectly aware of how she looked. Her eyes met mine, then darted away. I sat. Quiet. Uninvited, but welcomed. Like an expensive guest no one could afford to offend. Seren, Dad said, clearing his throat. We wanted to talk about what happened. Over the holidays. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the data theft or the public ambush? Camille rolled her eyes. You're making it sound criminal. It is, she scoffed. Come on. It was a dumb mistake, a moment of bad judgment. You accessed private financial files using my old credentials, forwarded them to a third party tied to a competing firm, and publicly exposed my portfolio in front of the family. That's not a moment. That's a campaign. Silence. Dad finally muttered, Whatever it was, we're here to find a solution. I knew that word. Solution in this house always meant Seren. Fix this. I'm not pressing charges, I said, leaning back. Mom exhaled. Relief softened the lines in her forehead. But, I added, that's not because I forgive you. Camille's glass paused mid-air. I'm not pressing charges, I continued, because I'm smarter than that. I know how people like you unravel, Camille. Not from lawsuits, from exposure, from reality. Her smile faltered. For the first time, she looked nervous. You're talking like this is war, she said quietly. I nodded. It is, but only one of us knows it. Dad put his fork down. You can't mean this, Seren. She's your sister. I turned to him. Where was that energy when she printed out my bank statements? He opened his mouth, closed it, didn't speak again. Camille stood abruptly, grabbing her wine. I need air. Mom stood too. Camille, I'm fine. She disappeared into the back porch. Mom looked at me with tired eyes. She's spiraling. She's been spiraling for 20 years, I said. She needs help. So get her a therapist, not my accounts. Mom flinched. You always make things so black and white. No, I said, rising from my seat. You do. You made me the black. You made her the white. And you told me if I stayed silent long enough, things would balance. I left the kitchen, walked out without dessert, without a hug, without asking for anything. In the driveway, I saw Camille smoking. Her face was turned toward the tree line, half shadowed by the porch light. You always wanted them to pick you, I said softly. She didn't look at me. I wanted to be seen, I nodded. You were. All my life, they saw you. They fed you. They forgave you, even when you were wrong. And you? I made myself small so you'd have room. She turned now. You've always been cold. No, I corrected. I've always been quiet. There's a difference. Back at my apartment, I made one final call. To Elena. Draft a cease and desist, I said. Against Camille and Chase. You're sure? I am. I'm done pretending this is a family matter. This is a professional breach. She paused. Understood. And Seren, this may escalate. I smiled. Let it. Sometimes the only way to stop being the scapegoat is to set the barn on fire yourself. 2 days after the cease and desist was served, Camille sent me a message. Can we talk? No lawyers, just sisters. The irony of that phrase didn't go unnoticed. She'd used it before. When she crashed my car in college, when she borrowed $5,000 and forgot to return a dime. When she slept with someone I once dated, then said, "But you weren't serious about him, right?" Still, I responded, not because I wanted resolution, but because sometimes the most effective revenge isn't destruction, it's precision. And to strike with precision, you have to let them speak first. We met at a cafe halfway between our two worlds. Hers, a modest rental in the suburbs. Mine, two high-rise blocks from the financial district. The place she picked was a neutral third space, as if she knew I wouldn't walk into her territory, and she couldn't afford to stand in mine. She was already seated when I arrived. No makeup this time. Sweater instead of silk. Coffee cup in hand, half empty. For a moment, she looked normal. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. I didn't respond. She gave a small smile. "I deserve that." "You do." A pause stretched between us. Not awkward, strategic. She started, then looked out the window. "I screwed up." I waited. I thought I could handle it. The business stuff, the pressure. But then Chase started asking about you, about what you were building. And I saw your files and, God, Serene, it was like standing in front of a palace while I'm living in a tent. I reacted. "You calculated," I corrected. That was not a reaction. That was a decision. She didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned in. "Look, I know what I did was unforgivable, but I miss you, and I want to make it right." I studied her face. I'd seen that look before, so many times. The, "I'm sorry, but not enough to change" expression. The one that relied on nostalgia to bulldoze boundaries. "What does make it right mean to you?" I asked. "Clear your name. Tell your people it was a misunderstanding. Drop the legal stuff." "And in return?" She hesitated. "I'll tell Chase to back off. He won't go after your investors. I'll even send an apology email to your team." There it was. A trade. One reputation for another. "You know what's funny?" I said. "I expected you to show up angry, defensive. But this is worse." She looked startled. "This is calculated compliance," I said. "You're not sorry. You're managing fallout. And you still think I'll protect you, because I always have." "I'm trying," she whispered. "No, you're manipulating." She leaned back. Her mouth twitched, like she was deciding between crying or turning cruel. "You think you're better than me," she said. "Always have." "No," I replied. "I think I finally stopped lowering myself to protect you." She laughed, short, bitter. "So what now? You let this whole thing burn?" I stood. "No, I let you burn yourself." Then I walked out. 2 days later, Elena called. "Camille violated the cease and desist. She forwarded one of your legacy contracts to Chase. They're trying to undercut a deal." I didn't flinch. "Let them try. We could file today," she said. "Or we could play it differently." "Not yet," I replied. "Let's watch." Because here's the truth. People like Camille self-destruct best when they think they're safe. That weekend, I hosted a dinner for 2 investors. Camille had no idea were on my radar. Quiet allies, people who move capital in whispers, not headlines. One of them had already received a friendly outreach from Chase's firm. I explained everything. Not in rage, not in defense, just facts. I showed the timeline, the IP leaks, the name overlaps. I let them read between the lines. They did. They pulled their passive interest from Chase's project. Not loudly, not publicly, but effectively. Camille would feel the fallout in slow motion. That's the thing about silent revenge. It echoes longer. Sometimes they think you're soft because you're silent, until they realize you've been building a firewall the entire time. Healing doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it's just waking up and not needing to brace yourself for a message that ruins your day. That morning, I didn't check my phone. I brewed my coffee, opened the curtains wide, and let the January sun bleach every shadow off my apartment floor. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was space, finally mine. Elena called mid-morning. "They went quiet," she said. "Camille and Chase?" "Yes. Too quiet." I smiled. They're regrouping. Want me to push? I looked out the window. No, let them stew. It's over for me. She paused. Are you sure you're ready to walk? I'm not walking away. I'm walking forward. Later that week, I called my assistant. I want the equity restructure finalized. I'm handing full ownership of the Austin office to Gavin. You're stepping down? No, I'm shifting up. I wasn't running anymore. I was pruning. Anything that had once been about proving I was enough, gone. Camille had taken her shot, but I had no intention of staying in her narrative. On Friday, I met with Lena, an architect I'd admired from afar for years. She'd just opened her own studio in Beacon. And I had an idea. I'm not trying to build a brand, I told her. I'm trying to build something I can wake up excited about. Something clean, quiet, precise. She leaned in. You're designing your next life. I nodded. You'll need blueprints, not revenge. That made me laugh harder than I expected. The next week, I visited my old apartment one last time. I boxed up the remnants: old journals, unused art supplies, a broken Polaroid camera Camille had once gifted me with the words, "You see things I miss." It had felt sincere back then. Now, I understood the truth. She saw what I saw. She just resented that I could hold it while she dropped it. I taped the last box and left behind a single envelope, no return address. Inside, the original post-it she had taped to her mirror. The one I wrote, "You're gonna do great. I believe in you." I didn't leave it for closure. I left it because letting go doesn't always look like slamming doors. Sometimes it's just no longer carrying what never belonged to you. 3 weeks after I'd walked out of that cafe, an email arrived. No subject, no signature, just, "You always made it look easy. That's why I hated you." It was from Camille. I stared at it for longer than I meant to. Not because it hurt, but because I realized I didn't need to reply. That same evening, I drove north. No destination, just motion. The road sliced through pine woods and small towns that didn't ask who I used to be. I stopped at a quiet inn. No online presence, no curated aesthetics. Just chipped wood siding and a flickering porch light. The owner, a woman in her 60s, handed me the room key without asking for a name. "You look like you needed somewhere still," she said softly. I smiled. "Yeah, I do." The room had a view of the lake, ice forming at the edges. The kind of silence that isn't hollow. It holds you. I sat on the windowsill, wrapped in the old blanket, and opened the notebook I hadn't touched in months. At the top of the page, I wrote one question. Who are you without needing to be chosen? For the first time in my life, I had no one to impress. No role to fill. No narrative to clean up for someone else's mess. And it didn't feel like loss. It felt like truth. 2 days later, Lena texted me. "Studio space is ready if you're still in. Beacon's already better with you in it." I texted back. "Give me one more week. I'm almost ready to return." I didn't need a new beginning. I needed to end well. Before heading back, I mailed one final letter. Not to Camille. To my mother. Inside, no accusations. No long explanations. Just a single line. "You taught me silence. I just learned to use it differently." I didn't need her to respond. The difference between silence as punishment and silence as peace is that only one requires an audience. As I drove back toward the life I was building, not rebuilding, there was no soundtrack, no dramatic fade-out, just me, a car, a quiet road, and something resembling weightlessness, not victory, not revenge, just return. To myself. If you've ever had to find peace, not because someone gave it to you, but because you finally stopped asking, I see you. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't standing up for yourself. It's walking away from people who taught you to stay quiet. If there's one truth I've learned, it's that healing doesn't always come with applause. It comes when you choose peace over permission. No one needs to understand your boundaries for them to be valid. And letting go isn't weakness, it's power in its purest, most silent form. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut ties with someone you once called family? What did that moment feel like for you? If this story touched you or made you pause to reflect, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And hey, if it didn't hit home, tell me why. I'd love to hear your side. And if you're still with me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story.